Thank you for hosting us. So let's start our journey.
Добрий день, дякую.
Oh, you get Ukrainian, but I can't Portuguese. I'm sorry.
A few survival words.
It's nice. And nice that these several words are not in Russian.
No, I don't know Russian.
So, how did you find Ukraine when you first stepped here?
Well, I knew a lot about Ukraine before I came. I was studying very much the country, the war, since I was posted as ambassador in Angola. And I felt the urge to come to Ukraine in 2022 when the war started, to be part of my country's effort to help find peace and to be part of an actor of bringing peace for Ukraine. When I arrived here, I already, of course, had a big understanding of Ukraine, of the Ukrainian nation, of the history, the society, the economy. But of course, it's one thing to know Ukraine from outside, and another one is to be here and witnessing day by day and understanding what the situation is. So as I usually say, no one can know Ukraine better than if you're here. From outside, many people give a lot of impressions and opinions and analysis, but they have to be here to understand Ukraine.
You mentioned political aspects, economical aspects, but what about people? How do you find Ukrainian people?
Well, I believe that Ukrainians have a very big proximity with Brazilians. It's not easy to understand when you know that we are geographically distant, but we are spiritually very close as nations. I have this feeling that Ukrainians have a deep attachment to Brazil, a deep sympathy, empathy with Brazil, and vice versa. Ukraine is widely known in Brazil. We follow the developments in Ukraine every day, in the media, in Congress, in society. And there is this spiritual connection between both countries, maybe because we're both countries of crossing roads, of civilizations, of influences, of immigration. Ukraine has had this very rich diversity in terms of influences from north, south, east, west that make the Ukrainian nation. And Brazil has had the same, say, multilateral immigration influence, ethnical, multi-ethnical, and racial influence. So I believe we have this common ground of identity. Besides the fact that our economies are similar in many ways, so this develops a lot of common interests. Agriculture is the main one. We are both powerhouses in agricultural production and exports and food security. And of course, we can always have to put in first place, although I'm mentioning last, but it's basically the most important aspect of this common identity, which is the immense Ukrainian community population in Brazil. Numbers go from 600,000 to 1 million Brazilians of Ukrainian descent. It is widely known about the states in the oblasts, the Brazilian oblasts, as you say here, that have hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian descendants, were a mirror of Ukraine in society, in traditions, in culture, in religion. Some cities in Brazil where Ukrainians are, when you go there, you feel as if you're traveling in Ukraine. They speak more Ukrainian than Portuguese.
Do we have our Ukrainian major here?
Ukrainian major?
Maybe.
Yes.
Maybe next elections will be Ukrainian one.
Yes. Well, they are very important in our Congress, in our parliament. Ukrainian diaspora is represented by local members of parliament in Brazil. Concluding my reply to your questions, well, yes, Brazil and Ukraine are spiritually very connected through history, through demographics, through the economy, through politics. For instance, today we engaged in building this architecture for peace for Ukraine at the United Nations. With our president deeply committed to helping end the hostilities in Ukraine and the suffering of the people in this humanitarian tragedy, which is war.
In your speech, you have mentioned all the answers to my all questions.
Well, I'm going to interview you then now.
Okay, and what about your life here in Ukraine? Where do you spend your free time? Do you feel discomfort like a foreign resident here in Ukraine? Do you feel safe here in Ukraine?
Well, I feel very integrated in Ukraine from the first day. I felt very welcome. I felt this embrace by the Ukrainian people, the smile that Ukrainians give to all foreigners. I have a lot of Ukrainian friends already, both at government and in society, private sector, and the foreign community. The foreign community here is deeply engaged to contribute also to end the war in Ukraine. We all may have different views on how to approach this, on how to end the war. And this is, I think, the wealth, the richness of diplomatic partnerships. Some countries find the end of the war in one way, other countries find it in another way, and we're all contributing to try to put Ukraine and Russia sitting at the same table to discuss their conditions to end this horrible war, which is a tragedy for both nations. A lot of people speak about victory or defeat, and I've heard many world leaders saying that ending the war is victory for both countries, and that's the most important. But going back to my arrival, yes, we come here with this feeling of being committed to Ukraine professionally. So basically, most of our day is spent studying and working for Ukraine, even when we're not at the office, when we're at home. And this is not only me, all the diplomats here, everybody in Brasilia. We're always exchanging information, sending news, exchanging ideas, debating, discussing, sometimes even having harsh arguments on how to help Ukraine. It's crazy, actually, when you think that we are across the Atlantic, but we are so committed to this war, to ending this war in Europe. A war that has hurt a generation that had never seen it. Our parents lived World War II, which was the global, and from there on, even if I am older, let's say, but my generation never saw this. I never saw it, and we read about it in the books. We had the Cold War, which was different, and then in 22 we see this massive warfare that goes against everything that especially we diplomats. So my agenda here is, and I'm sure it's the agenda of all ambassadors and all diplomats, entire foreign communities, is basically dedicated to Ukraine, understanding, studying. We need to keep up the spirit, learn with the Ukrainian resilience, outside work, organizing cultural events, meeting people, organizing dinners, lunches, film festivals, shows, everything that we do to keep up the spirit and offer alternatives for the Ukrainian population, for the Kyiv population. But I would say, in general, I work and sleep. So I feel very safe in Ukraine in general. Of course, there's no social violence. There's no criminality in what we understand in an big urban center. But there is the unsafety of war, of course. So we have to learn the protocols of security and understand the degrees of threat that we face. Of course, we are facing it. Everybody knows it. The capital is not spared, but we try when we can to just have this life as normal as possible. As I call it, it's a normal vulnerability and try to live a normal life.
And what about the role of Brazil as a mediator between Ukraine and the Russian Federation?
Mm-hmm.
As I know, Brazil has its own peace plan. What terms this plan is included? What are the start points from which Brazil can engage in process?
I'll start by your last question. The starting point is that the conditions for the end of the war depend solely on Ukraine and on Russia. I mean, only the two countries can define and discuss and debate what their conditions for ending the war, at least for ceasefire. We need to understand that there are two elements of this debate. A lot of people don't understand these two elements. They confuse both in one. We need to understand that there is the element of ending hostilities, which is a ceasefire, and there is the element of a peace agreement, which is a longer term negotiation. What Brazil engaged in was a framework for a ceasefire. Framework to end the hostilities, which was debated together with China, presented at UN. It's under the UN shield. It is being discussed in New York. It is open to new members that want to join this effort. Today we have 17 members member states joining this group of what we call Group of Friends for Peace. The Group of Friends for Peace has a document, we say a founding document, which is the 6-point understanding declaration. Let's say, or this framework sets or proposes certain conditions to lead both sides to sit at a negotiating table based on a ceasefire, on confidence building measures. It goes in line with what is being proposed today in the trilateral talks mediated by the United States, which is the idea of a ceasefire, line of contact, disengagement of forces, discussing guarantees, after which having an end to hostilities and having weapons silenced, both countries can sit down and discuss their conditions, the deep conditions for a peace agreement, the deeper conditions, which are the territorial questions, the guarantees, reparations, every other reconstruction, every other element of a peace agreement. So we need to understand that there are two sides of this equation. What Brazil has been working on has been an effort for a ceasefire. It has never engaged itself in advancing red lines or trying to propose elements which pertain to a peace agreement, which only Ukraine and Russia can decide. We right now are not active because there are trilateral talks mediated by the US, which we welcome. We actually, our president engaged very firmly on that as a facilitator, speaking with the Russian leader and with the Ukrainian leader, more directly in Moscow with the Russian leader, in order for Russia to hear peace talks, to a ceasefire, to the first direct bilateral talks that were immediately held afterwards in Istanbul. Our president has been at the root of this Group of Friends for Peace, together with China, since the beginning of his term. Even before he was elected, he was offering to help facilitate, mediate, however you call it. But this, of course, depends on both countries agreeing or finding the moment to consider the possibility of Brazil to help. And partners that have the capacity to dialogue with both sides. This is very important for us. If we break the bridges with one side, we will not be able to serve peace. Starting with our president, President Lula, to his entourage in the presidency of Brazil and the foreign minister, this effort has been built in New York, been offered to both Ukraine and Russia. In 2025, the US offered to mediate. It's been trying to mediate now with the trilateral talks. And as I said, our president was deeply engaged in speaking to President Zelensky and to President Putin to bring both countries to a negotiating table. In May last year, you will remember when President of Russia called the first direct talks since 2022. He mentioned the efforts of China, of Brazil, of the United States in helping build this new bridge of dialogue. From then on, talks are going on. They're harder sometimes, they're easier other times. We just hope that that this momentum is not lost, that we don't slide quickly into inflamed narratives of war, that we keep the moment of dialogue open. We invite other countries to open to this. We invite all the European countries to adhere to this process. We need a global effort of mediation, facilitation, call it whatever you want, but countries willing to help end this war. And we're available for both countries for that.
What is your opinion that the ceasefire is only a pause which gives the opportunity to Russia for rearming?
Well, we have to respect the Ukrainian views. It's difficult for me to say what I think. It's up to Ukrainians to understand, from the president to the societies, to the military, to know when they are ready to pause. And of course, in Moscow, the same. So the issue of guarantees is part of this package, which is being dealt with. I understand there have been progresses from both sides to admit some kind of guarantee. But on a personal view, if you ask me, what if we end and then it starts again? One thing is to have peace and negotiate something that is fragile and could lead to war. Another thing is to be at war and to negotiate something that could stop it. And say, well, if they come back, or if it comes back again, well, if it comes back again, it will go back again to where we are now. So, but if we stop it and we manage to build a momentum of trust, of confidence, and make everyone see how wonderful it is to live in peace, maybe this will help maintain it. We're not at peace negotiating something that could be poorly negotiated and would lead to war. We are at war, a very bad war, a horrible war, killing people every day. So anything that we do to stop it, well, if it comes back, well, if it comes back, it comes back, but we need to stop it. And we, of course, we need to, not we, but Ukraine and Russia need to define what minimum guarantees are to make it stop the monitoring of the ceasefire, which countries will be engaged in that, the surveillance of a ceasefire, of the surveillance of the so-called line of contact. Even when we see a ceasefire of 1 day, of 2 days, we see how good it is, how people benefit from this idea that there will be no missiles and drones flying, and there will be no soldiers being killed at the front line. Let's help Ukraine and Russia end the hostilities. We're not talking about deeper legal issues. These have to be discussed based on the end of hostilities and confidence building. It's very difficult to discuss a deeper agreement when you are exchanging missiles and drones and people are dying every day.
You have mentioned the role of the president of Brazil in negotiations, but he stated that Ukraine is also responsible for the war. So what actions or decisions of the Ukrainian authorities led to the war?
Our president has been deeply committed to ending this war. As I said to you, we have our own wars in Brazil, our own internal wars, which are part of his agenda. The war against hunger, against poverty, the war against this polarized political debate. Continue his efforts since the first term to develop our country and our society. And it is giving very strong results. But at the same time, he is deeply committed the global agenda on peace and security, on the environment, on food security. And he committed himself to helping end the war on Ukraine. When the president speaks about responsibilities for war, we have to understand that he's speaking about the responsibility or the capacity to end it, which only Ukraine and Russia have. It has to be seen on this context. It's not about guilt, it's about responsibility. And the responsibility lies on Ukraine, on President Zelensky. He carries this huge load on his back to end the war, and the responsibility lies on Russia to end the war. But we can also speak about the global responsibility, right, to end the war, in which we are engaged in working for it every day. But of course, depending on Ukraine and Russia accepting this or considering that this participation is necessary. So when our president speaks of responsibility, it's not about guilt. It's about who can end the war. And of course, it has to do with the two countries that are engaged. It's not about who started the war. He has made it very clear, and we have had our positions very clear in terms of the responsibility for the war. We have stated that in UN resolutions, relevant UN resolutions, and from presidential to high-level authorities, declarations that condemn the invasion against Ukraine, that defend its territorial integrity, its sovereignty, that ask Russia to retreat, to stop the war. There's no dilemma there. There's no misunderstanding.
So you agreed that Russia has violated the international law?
Yes, of course. We have made that very clear in every official position and in declarations from our higher authorities. Well, just a few days ago, our president, at the press interview with Chancellor Merz from Germany, he stated very clearly that he reproduced his words, but I remember them pretty well. I as president, I am against the invasion of Ukraine. As I am against the invasion of other countries like Venezuela, Iran, the invasion on Gaza, we cannot have the territorial integrity of countries being violated as they are being violated, and by members of the Security Council. We need to stop that. There is no dilemma there. There's no misunderstanding on the Brazilian position. We have been very clear against the invasion of Ukraine. We have a different way of trying to end the war, of trying to help end the war. And this we do by promoting dialogue and promoting and asking both sides to sit and offering to sit in dialogue and discuss their to end the war. And we are available for that.
So you're saying is that we can defeat the Russian Federation only through the diplomacy.
It's not about defeat. As I said before, we believe that ending the war is victory. It's victory for all, for both sides. We only know how to deal with diplomacy. We don't use military force. And we only use our military in self-defense. We don't engage in foreign wars. We are militarily neutral in the world, in our region and in the world. We have been like this historically. We involve our military in self-defense and in UN missions.
And
because we believe that if we engage in a military role or supply, we will prolong the war, and there's no guarantee that wars will end through military means. If we look at the history of the world ever since World War II, no war has been won through military means. No bigger power has ever won a war against a smaller power. So this is a lesson for the big powers. The only way to end the wars has been through diplomatic means. I think history teaches us that. And of course, Ukraine was invaded and works on its defense, but also benefits from partners in diplomacy. So, or we can wake up the next day with a nuclear fallout. It's anything is possible.
Okay, let's focus our attention on international policy. How do you think does the United States violate the international law in Venezuela and in Iran?
As I mentioned before, we have a premise that we set ourselves upon as a nation. We have fully committed to the multilateral system, to the international law, to the peaceful solution of controversies, to the resort to tribunals, to the courts, and not to wars of invasion. And this position applies to Russia, and it applies to the United States. We ask them to keep their actions within the international legal system, within the multilateral instances. We work for them. We are one of the biggest donors to the United Nations system. I think the 8th or 9th biggest donor. So we also put our money into this system. A lot of resources are invested there. Also in peacekeeping forces with our troops. So it's not only talk, it's action. And we invite all these countries that seem to have been tempted to the military idea to come back to the legal system, to abandon war, to abandon these invasions, and to use the legal resources we have to settle these controversies and to respect the integrity of territorial integrity and the sovereignty of these countries. It doesn't matter if we like them or not. If we like, everybody is entitled to have their own opinions on whether this government is nice or not nice, good or bad. But it's up to their people to decide if they should leave or not.
No, there is an idea that such countries as the USA, the Russian Federation, China, can prosper only in war. But other European countries, for example, can thrive in peace. So it is a dilemma and nobody knows how to solve it.
I'm not sure about China. I'm not necessarily convinced that China...
But Taiwan is a question.
No, Taiwan is an issue in China, but we don't see China as an imperialist power. I mean, China seems to want to do business, trade, and investment, and they understand that peace is necessary for that. Taiwan, they haven't invaded Taiwan. From what I understand from the Chinese themselves, if they wanted to take over Taiwan, they would take over Taiwan in 24 hours. They're trying to avoid this, as far as we know. I personally don't see China as a world threat. I see China as a country that's trying to build an environment of peace where you can do trade and business. We haven't seen China engaged in wars, pure imperialistic wars, as far as I remember. It was actually invaded a few times, but I don't see why China is global threat. China is trying to help mediate a peaceful solution to the war. From what I understand, the Chinese leader has spoken to the Russian leader many times to end the war. So I think we need to work on facts and not on conspiracy theories that no, this country actually would benefit from war, etc., etc. I don't know.
Does Brazil benefit from war in Ukraine through the price changes on markets?
Absolutely not. Brazil has been hit by the war in Ukraine through the price of commodities, through the price of and supply of fertilizers, the increase of the wars in Iran, for instance, increase in oil prices. There's absolutely no grounds economically or politically to say we would ever benefit from this war. On the contrary, we have been working for this war to end from the beginning. It's destroying supply chains, it's destroying markets, consumer markets, increasing prices, increasing commodities, threatening the stability of the supply chains. It doesn't make any sense for anyone to say that any country would benefit from the war. We don't benefit from the idea of global economic sanctions. This only disrupts the economy globally. We bet on peace. We believe that it's a much more feasible to find a peaceful settlement to wars and the war in Ukraine than to try to find some kind of global coherence on international sanctions. We are seeing what is happening with sanctions today. I mean, sometimes they are applied because they are convenient. Sometimes they're not applied because they're not convenient.
Are they efficient?
It is. We understand that it's making all countries suffer. A war is making all countries suffer. It's making Russia suffer. It's making Ukraine suffer. It's making Europe suffer. It's making the global economy suffer. We see the difficulty that Ukraine has to supply food security for African countries. War is hell. Nobody wins with war. With sanctions, without sanctions. We don't criticize sanctions. It's not that we are criticizing countries that are adopting sanctions. We just believe they're not effective in the long term, and that we need to work on ending the wars. Unless we build a multilateral system of global sanctions, which we don't have right now. So sanctions are being adopted unilaterally, case by case. They have an impact, of course, but more than sanctions, war has an impact on these economies. Much more than sanctions. I read calculations the other day that one combined missile strike of Russia on Ukraine costs about 200 million euros in one night. If this is repeated during 1 month, it's more than €1 billion spent on weapons that could be spent on their economy. Our president has said that very clearly. Stop spending money on these weapons, on these wars, and put this money on your economy, on your society, on the development of the poor. And who is being more affected by the war? The poor people.
Yes, they are.
That's very clear. In every country, it's the most vulnerable who are being affected. It's for me, it's actually strange that I need to speak about this as ambassador of Brazil in Ukraine, and that the world leaders have not been able to understand this. Our positions in terms of sanctions needed to be adopted multilaterally, not unilaterally.
Some people consider that we may get the word of regional bullies. It will be the global USA, for example. It unites both Americas. Russia will stretch from Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean. And maybe we save Asia. Do Brazil ready for this scenario?
We're not ready for a scenario like that. We're working for a scenario where all nationalities and sovereignties and independences are respected, because
maybe Trump suggests to buy Brazil.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we can't accept this kind of
proposal,
view, because we were once colonized and we gained our independence. So we cannot accept that this principle is violated, right? If we have a world scenario in which national independences are threatened, then we go back to our own history, in which we had to fight for our independence and to keep it. So any country that has once been colonized will always support the sovereignty of broader countries. So this is quite clear. This is why we could never admit or accept or even be quiet about the invasion of Ukraine. We were not quiet about it. We have been clear, and we have been asking the Russians to stop this war, to negotiate, to sit down and negotiate. And we have said it in the UN, in our presidential declarations, high-level authorities, that this is not the right way to work. Our president even said once, you know, if there were issues with minorities or national groups, you know, you have the courts to deal with that. It's not through invasion that you deal with that. I think we are very coherent, and no, we could not live with the idea of redrawing the world map. You know, we cannot deal with redrawing the world map every day. You know, we need to respect the borders, international borders, and that's what we do.
How do you think the global South can compete with the global North?
We don't compete. We are not in the world to compete with anybody. We understand our global responsibility as a continental nation, as the 8th largest economy in the world, with 220 million people. We understand our common heritage, regional heritage, our African heritage, our European heritage, and our Asian heritage. Brazil is made of all these confluences. We're like the United States of America. We're made of immigrants from exactly the same areas of the world. So how could we live with the idea of competition? No, we live with the idea of integration, and we live with the idea of our global responsibility. We cannot picture a condominium of houses, right? Then you have, this is how we build Brazil in our foreign policy. You have a condominium of houses. You have some big houses, some smaller houses. They're all living together.
And how about the Alphaville village in Brazil?
Well, but this is exactly what we're talking about. So we understand the economy, and we are in favor. We are not against business or anything like that. I mean, we are in favor of business and the work of the state together with the private sector to build wealth, to generate taxes, to redistribute this through society in good public services. The example of the condominium is you cannot build a house, fence yourself in there, be wealthy, have your energy, your education, your food, and then see all the neighboring houses collapse in poverty and lack of education, lack of food, lack of security. So we have this responsibility with our neighbors in Latin America and in Africa.
Brazil feeds the world. Ukraine is also breadbasket. Can we cooperate, for example, and create something like OPEC, but in agriculture?
Well,
It will be, I don't know, the organization of the crops exporting countries.
well, but
OPEC.
But this is already working. Ukraine is a founding member of the Global Alliance Against Food and Poverty, which was established in the G20 meeting in Rio in 2024. This is the OPEC for food, and Ukraine joined immediately as a founding member. It's a very recent initiative. It's on its initial steps. But the fact that Ukraine and Brazil are founding members is very important. They have already held meetings, high-level meetings. We are talking, we're integrating. We have a very good political coordination between Brazil and Ukraine in the multilateral instances. Our dialogue is a very good dialogue. Our foreign ministers have spoken at least 8 times since Minister Sibiha took office. They met three times at least, and they spoke another at 8 times in conversations. Our presidents met twice. The last time was last year in September. They were actually going to meet again if President Zelensky had been able to go to the COP30 meeting, but it was a hard time here for him with the situation in Donetsk. He had to stay. But if he had gone to the COP30 meeting, we had already agreed on a second bilateral meeting in less than 2 months between the two presidents, which would be the third one in the last 2 years.
But we do not coordinate our supply chains, for example, or we do not coordinate the market prices like OPEC does.
But I think this is all part of the Global Alliance Against Food and Hunger, against hunger and poverty. It is, you mentioned very well, it is sort of an OPEC for food security. And as I said, it's in the crib. It's just started. The world is shaken by so many crisis, that all these positive initiatives, they're eagerly waiting for us to solve these other major emergencies, to be able to work on such frameworks. But the global initiative against hunger and poverty is going well. And the fact that both countries are founding members is also very positive.
Your predecessor criticized Ukraine for corruption, said that it was the main reason of low international investment here in Ukraine. And what about Brazil? How do you find the level of international investment in Brazil?
Well, I'm not aware really of declarations from my predecessor that would criticize Ukraine on corruption. What we know is that Ukraine is working very hard to develop the institutions on fighting corruption, within its admission process to the European Union, but also on a national basis, with the idea that taxes, and this is a very good idea. Let's say that taxes, when we pay taxes, we need to know that our taxes are the result of production, right? Of work and production, the private sector, the individual production. We're paying taxes, and these taxes are being transparently received by the state, and they are fully being returned to society through fantastic public services, in health, education, transportation, etc.
Here in Ukraine or in Brazil?
This is the universal concept, let's say, right, of the importance of transparency and avoiding corruption, right? Because this creates the credibility in the system, in the state system and the private sector, because corruption is not only a state problem, it's a private sector problem. It involves both sides. The universal concept of the fight of corruption is aimed at a very simple reasoning, that we produce as companies and we produce as individuals and we pay taxes happily, because we know that these taxes will be fully managed by a clean, transparent system that will give them back to us in public services, which is basically what we see happening in many countries that are transparent, let's say, that are higher ranked in the fight against corruption, like the Nordic countries, for instance.
What about the average salary in Brazil?
Well, the average salaries have increased very much. Main features of Brazil since the early 2000s has been the fight against poverty. Development of governmental programs that fight poverty, that improve education, that improve the income of the lower classes. And these programs have been working very well. We have actually been able to export cooperation programs that have to do with the incentives from the private sector and from the government to raise the income of the lower salaries. And this involves teachers, police, the military, all public servants in general. And the minimum wages has increased.
What is the rate of the minimum wage?
It's around $350.
It's minimum or average? Minimum.
Yeah, 300. Depends on the exchange rate, but in dollar terms, it's around 350. And this is an effort that involves the public and the private sector, right? The public sector creating policies that stimulate production, employment, salary, better salaries, and the private sector committed to that. Let's say decreasing the margin of profit. Right? One of the problems we had in Brazil for a long time was that the private sector was working on maximum margins of profit from its revenues and its expenses, which includes salaries. And this has been there's a change of mentality in the country in the last decades, and very strong. It's been a very strong policy of President Lula from his first term in 2003. He was establishing these first programs of incentives to salary increases, educational improvements, because both things work together, right? A more educated society means better employment and better wages.
It was a little advertisement of the policy of your president.
Yes, because It's the government policies, and every government has been committed to that. I mean, basically, this Brazilian society has been engaged in this effort, and it expects their presidents to engage themselves into this effort. From the early 1990s, there was, when the transition from the military regime to democracy, progress that started in 1985. We saw the engagement of society, consciousness of society demanding from the leaders that we end poverty and that we improve our society. If you go to see all the numbers of our economic growth, of our reduction of poverty, from life expectancy, for instance, rates have improved enormously in Brazil. If I'm not wrong, the last figures put us at the average of 79 years, which is way above, let's say, which is much closer to a full development process. I believe the maximum life expectancy in the top economies is at 84, 85, and the lowest ones are at 50.
Is it easy for immigrants to find work in Brazil?
It's not easy, of course. We have had the increase in the yearly positive rates in terms of employment. So immigrants it is easy in the sense of a welcoming society. Brazilians are very open to immigration. We don't even know who is an immigrant or not, because everyone from everywhere in the world could be Brazilian. It's they're automatically integrated in our society. So in this sense, it's easy. Yes, I can't speak about job opportunities, how the private sector is moving, who's being hired, what kind of demands are out there. But I would say that from the lower qualification levels, especially in agriculture and in industry, the opportunities are there.
So Brazil is a leader for transactions in crypto. How do you find crypto? Is this a fuel for economy?
Well, you're telling me something new. I had no idea we are leaders in crypto economy. I don't understand anything about this method.
So you have no savings in crypto.
No saving. It's something very abstract to me what it means. I read about it. I see people investing. I see people making money and losing a lot of money. I actually read more about people losing a lot of money in the crypto market than.
So you prefer invest in gold?
Oh, I'm not an investor in gold myself. I invest in the education of my family.
Okay, it will be the last question for today. How do you evaluate your performance as Brazil ambassador to Ukraine, and what would you define as a successful mission here in Ukraine?
Good question. Thank you for asking. I think a successful mission is a motivated mission. We as ambassadors need to be motivated. We need to be inspired. We need to come to work with a flame in our spirit, believing that we're doing the best we can for our bilateral relationship, for the country where we're serving, for the country that we represent. We need to keep this inspiration on every day. I came here with this motivation, with this inspiration. The main motivation was to help end the war, to help bring peace back, and to help, or to be a part of this international effort to help Ukrainians go back to peace and prosperity, and to help our country, Brazil, in this effort, in this process. The motivation is the main reward. We need to have it. And I think when you are motivated, the results come. In our citizen integration, which is one of the biggest axis of our relationship, is the people, and the cultural integration that this entails, given the immense Ukrainian communities in Brazil. We are bringing results. We have defined some specific areas that we need to target, and that is health, energy, culture, the cultural integration, the citizenship axis, and we're trying to move the pieces there, because each one of these areas has a lot of initiatives behind them, and this is where we can work best.
Wow. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.